Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Charisse Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guest today is Matthew Dennis, founder and CEO of Bolt Builds in Brooklyn, New York. When Matt founded the Brooklyn Design Plus Build firm, Bolt, in 2016, he was still finishing his Master of Architecture degree at Pratt Institute. At its inception, the fundamental idea of Bolt was to generate a dialogue between what is materially possible and creatively engaging. For the past 8 years, with a curiosity to ground the intricacies of architectural design and fabrication into construction sites across the U.S., he has been shaping the contours of Bolt into a practice where empirical learning takes center stage. Unbound by given design vocabularies, he navigates the evolution of design and construction with the consideration of clients and stakeholders within hospitality, retail, and high-end residential spaces. The project we will be talking about today is the very cool Agency of Record cocktail bar and restaurant in New York City. Designed with a keen eye on the golden age of advertising, the Agency of Record cocktail bar unfolds like a visual love letter to mid-century New York, injecting a playful twist that seamlessly resonates with the pulse of the present. Crafted by the skilled hands of the Bolt team, the atmosphere at Agency of Record is one of intimacy and elegance, all created with custom design and fabrication by their in-house workshop. Tell me that isn't cool. Now, let's get into the details. The project we are talking about today is the Agency of Record cocktail bar and restaurant in New York City. Matt, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Crazy weather in New York like we have in Oregon right now?
There has been. We went on a stretch of, I think, over 600 days of no snow. And then we've got snow, I think the past 2 weeks, we've had some snowstorms, but most of it's gone already. But I hear it's a bit worse where you are.
Yeah, it's been a little, I don't think the weather it's more severe than usual. I don't think it was really that much out of the ordinary for January in Oregon. It was the power going out for 200,000 people, which is a big chunk of our city.
Oh, that's a big deal.
And them taking a very long time to get it back up and running. I think that was the bigger issue for most of the city than the weather outside. But we're all good now. We're ready to get back to business. So we start every episode typically with a little bit of an icebreaker question just to get us warmed up.
Yeah.
So mine for you. Times and technology have changed a lot in our industry in recent years. That typically signals the need for changes in the workplace as well.
Yeah.
And I joke a lot that this is very much an industry that is slow to change, very much we've always done it this way industry, which drives me insane, by the way. So my icebreaker question for you is, what do you think our architecture firms could be doing better or be doing to better serve the large influx of younger professionals that are entering the AEC industry as compared to how we have operated in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of people coming into design, and typically, younger people are coming into design for all of the right reasons. They're in it because they love creativity. They love the manifestation of ideas. They love the work. And I think a lot of times that can occasionally be taken advantage of, where people, they burn out. It's pretty well known in our industry that new people out of school, younger people in bigger firms, they work really hard, and they put in a lot of hours, and a lot of people get discouraged. So I think that's one big thing in particular with my team is, treating people like human beings. It sounds very simple, but, having that ability to kind of see your employees, see them as team members, see them as individuals, and, focus on that and kind of, try to prop that up and build that up and use it. I mean, it's everyone has great ideas, and I think it's just creating the culture and environment that people feel, free to express them and don't feel like work is everything. I think that's a big thing where I'm a big proponent of play and experimenting and, not taking yourself too seriously. And I think that goes a really long way when, trying to attract talent, trying to keep people on your team. More and more you see higher turnover rates in all types of industries, including ours. And I think that bodes well, when you pay attention to the human and really give them the time and the space and the energy to kind of, understand why they got into the field and, really give them the platform to explore and a little bit of agency to, try, fail, and adapt. I think you have to be open to change. I think that's really important. You can get very comfortable very easy. And I think it's important to remain slightly uncomfortable so you're never too set in your ways and never too static, where I think disruption every so often is important to keep you fresh and keep your ideas, alive. And again, keep people excited to be working with you, whether it's your clients or your own team. I think that's a contagious thing that isn't always seen in a lot of practices. So that would be my note of, things to pay attention to as the industry is changing a bit.
Well, I asked you that on purpose because you are a younger professional compared to me. I've been around quite some time, and I know that because I've been around quite some time, I am a person that is constantly looking for ways to change and improve and produce better work. But not everybody in my generation and older necessarily has that mindset. And I know how much I've seen the industry change already from the time I started at 20 years old compared to now. And I see a lot of these places. I know how I raised my kids. To, the kind of advice I gave my grown sons about the workplace and what they should and shouldn't, when they should and shouldn't stay. And the old days of staying at one job for 30 years, no matter how they treat you, are gone. And because our teeter-totter of generations is tipping so much right now, because Gen X, my little Gen X, is so tiny. We don't really count for much, except for we're the golden goose now. And it's really important that we recognize that we have raised our children to expect a different world. So now us that have been around a while have to start giving them that different world. No, that's so true. And just challenging things when they don't seem right. I think it's basic of like just treating other people how you'd want to be treated. I can tell you, I learned quite a bit of, a lot of things not to do from, previous employers and other people in the industry. And it's a funny thing where even in grad school, it's there. You work crazy hours. Architecture. My sister was actually going through medical school at the same time I was going through architecture school, and she's like, "You're working harder than me." She's like, "You are. For a fact, you are putting in more time and more hours." And it's just the expectation, I think, because there's the love there of the design and just the idea, the love of the idea, and seeing it all the way through. And I think people valuing that a little bit more, and just different ways of exploring it. Like AI is going to be such a powerful tool. I know a lot of people are scared of it, but I actually think it will be a fantastic tool. We've started to integrate it a bit just into our workflow, and it has exciting potential. So it's progress is not going to stop. So you can either take part in it and then see how it can make your work a bit better and be curious rather than dismissive. The one other thing, and then we'll get to the project, the one other thing that I often see with people who've been around a long time as opposed to younger professionals is this attitude, well, I had to go through my paces. So you have to go through the paces. But the fact of the matter is the years of spending 10 or 15 years doing stair details or things like that before you had an opportunity to be a leader, those years are over.
Yeah.
We are putting very young people in positions of responsibility 10, 15 years sooner than we used to. So that old mindset of putting you through your paces, I had to do it, so you have to. I think we could be more forward thinking.
I think so too. And I mean, that doesn't devalue everything that goes into that time, because there is, you need to learn, and there's so much information that you have to, understand and comprehend and then be able to explain to someone else, that it does take a lot of time, but that doesn't mean that kind of repetitiveness and making it more into, it's the work versus play. And when it becomes all work, I feel like that's when the light gets a little dimmer, people get a little bit discouraged, and the ideas may just not be as good.
I couldn't agree more. If I don't get to play, I'm a cranky person.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this project. So the Agency of Record Cocktail Lounge and Restaurant is in the historic Renwick Hotel in Midtown, once home to F. Scott Fitzgerald, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yep.
And pretty historic. Tell me a little bit about the background and history of this cocktail lounge / restaurant in this space.
Yeah, so like you said, the Renwick was built, designed in, I believe, built in 1928. It was the same architect who designed St. Patrick's Cathedral. Talented gentleman designed it, and then it became one of the first kind of live-work spaces for, you mentioned F. Scott Fitzgerald, John Steinbeck, Thomas Mann, like amazing creatives kind of came through this space, and that's really just seeped into the walls of the space. And the cocktail lounge restaurant that we've created, the idea was just to kind of pull that out. It's all there. It's in the walls. It's in the history of it. It's in the neighborhood. You're close to Grand Central. How can we really just tap into what's already there in that kind of historical context, give it a little bit of breath of fresh air and some life, and again, just build on that history, and not try to mimic what was there, but pay homage to it, give it the credit that it deserves, and create a space that facilitates more of that conversation and creativity that was there all the way back in the 20s and 30s.
You did a fantastic job.
Wow, thank you.
Because the minute I looked at these pictures, I'm like, when am I going to be in New York next? I want to go there. If that was here in Portland, I would go there. It's a beautiful space, but you're maintaining that vibe of that history, but making it new. Really, it's stellar. It is really stellar. And I don't say that about everything, but it really is.
I appreciate that.
What was the client's mission for this project? What were they looking to accomplish when they first called you? I mean, what was that conversation? Here's what we want to do.
Yeah, it was a tricky one, because this is post-COVID. Restaurants in New York were obviously hit hard, and Midtown especially. So this was a space that they wanted to have kind of a multitude of uses. One being, bring back that midday martini lunch in the Midtown, location where it is. And it's just, having that use of, that comfortable, slower, long lunch that, you can have a drink, you can kind of sink into your seat and you can feel relaxed. And at the same time, designing a space that can then pivot as it gets a little bit darker. The kind of more nighttime crew starts to come out, and have it have a DJ aspect, a dance floor aspect, and a little bit more of a nightlife vibe as well. So you're kind of, which I love it when a client comes to me and says, I want a space to do more than one thing, because, again, we're talking about being static. Architecture by nature is quite static. So when you have a space that through, the changing of furniture, the manipulation of lighting, you can have it really convey different feelings over the course of one day. is, an exciting challenge, especially in the space. The space had, fairly low ceilings. It does kind of naturally have a little bit of that built-in intimacy and mood to it. And we were really trying to enhance that and then break it into a kind of a multitude of parts that can then, come together to form a whole when it's being used as a lunch or dinner restaurant, but then be broken down into, the bar area. We have a gorgeous private dining room, the dance floor where the DJ booth is set up. So that they really were asking for a lot, but we love a good challenge, and we love to think about things that can have more than one use, whether it's, the furniture, the space, overall, or, lighting, seating, and how we can get clever about arranging things differently and having things fold and move, so it could have multiple uses.
Well, and that's one of the things I loved about that is that I also love to dance. So I say, dance floor. But in this day and age of restaurants struggling to survive, even post-COVID, having a space that can make revenue throughout your entire day. I mean, some hotels, restaurants are not necessarily particularly busy in the evening, and then, they're a done deal. But having it cater to two different groups is really smart, as well as keeping it viable. And being able to afford it.
Yeah. And having the space, we've run into a lot of spaces that when we start a project, they're wide open. And our job is really to kind of break them into parts so it will never feel empty. Even if you're in a space with one or two people, you feel a bit of intimacy, you feel kind of a part of the space. You don't feel kind of alone in a large room. And even, especially once you start to layer multiple uses on, you need a fairly big space to do that, but you need to be able to subdivide it in a way that if it's just being used for breakfast, for instance, the kind of lower area of the floor plan serves perfectly. It's not attached to the bar. The food comes out of the kitchen, and you have a smaller dining room that's just for hotel guests for breakfast. And then it can open up a little bit bigger for lunch. And then the evening crowd, you open up the bar. And then you also have, say, the PDR, that's a private dining area. That's a kind of a beautiful double curb space that we create to kind of like hold you. You can have a meeting there. You can have a, private lunch there, a private dinner there. So, it was, I think, necessary now with restaurants to have more than one use and not be so one-dimensional, and be able to pivot, I think, is really important, because you can design a space with the best of intentions, incredible research. You don't know how someone's going to use it until they actually start to use it. And being able to have a space that can slightly adjust and be tweaked once it's open, and you can favor, the bar crowd, or maybe surprisingly, people love eating breakfast there because it's so close to Grand Central. These are things that evolve over time. And if the space can, flex a bit based off of that kind of live use, I think that's incredibly important.
Well, it also sounds to me like the space probably, because of its different uses, accommodates a lot of different age groups as well.
Yeah, no, that's
and that's important too. I mean, where somebody who is maybe a little bit older or further in their career may love to go there for lunch, but wouldn't necessarily even consider going in the evening to go out dancing. Wouldn't be me, but that's a whole nother conversation. But
right.
Once again, you have a larger customer base that way.
100%.
Or people commuting in the morning and stopping in for breakfast, but wouldn't be anywhere near there at lunch or at dinner time.
Yeah, and the space, having the space appeal to those different audiences as well. We have these plush banquettes throughout the space, but then, we have this platform that, if you're, part of the breakfast or lunch crowd, you probably just see it as a divide between two different banquettes. But we also thought of it as you could actually stand on it at night if you're dancing, and it gets a little rowdier. So we're trying to appeal, use something that, again, has a function, but on a few different levels for different age groups and crowds.
I will be going back to look at the pictures now, even closer. I have them open over here. Okay, so we just talked about how the space operates as both this lunch martini spot, and the late night dancing and crowd, and breakfast as well, which I wasn't aware of.
Yep.
So let's start getting into the design. Let's start with a broader question. Tell me what your overall design goals and initial vision were for the space in a little bit more detail um, than just trying to honor the history
Yeah.
in a new way. But give me a little detail about when you started thinking about what do I want to do here.
Yeah. So, having the prompt of the dance floor being an important part of it was an interesting challenge. We had to think square footage. We always start out diagrammatically. How are we programming this space? How many people do we want on the dance floor, right? Almost starting there, and then how many seats do we want? So starting to play around with a few different scenarios of how do we make this work within the existing envelope of the space. And what we ended up doing, the space has 2 levels. We actually expanded the upper level because we realized we need a bigger dance floor. That's a big part of this. And it will actually serve a few different things. It helps kind of add a bit of drama and a little bit more performance for the entrance to the PDR. So we create a nice aisleway that leads to these custom doors that we actually made in-house. It makes the dance floor a bit bigger, and it gives a little bit of space to the DJ booth that's tucked in the corner. And it has a little bit more of a softer entry from the hotel side as well. So there's 2 entrances to the space, one directly off the street and one through the hotel lobby. And we really wanted to cater to who we thought was coming from where. Breakfast crowd we thought was coming from the hotel. That leads directly into that lower dining room. And we kind of used form to encourage you to naturally walk towards the lower space. From the street, we figured that's going to be more of the nighttime crowd coming from all over New York. They come through past the bar and then opens up into the dance floor. So then we also had to think about the maneuverability of all the furniture. So yeah, it was just designed, in consideration with both, the functionality of the space and also the staff that operates it, not having to stack or drag furniture around the main dining area. It can just easily be slid and moved and put into particular pockets that allows the dance floor to open up almost naturally. So when you come in, it looks like the space transformed, but takes very little effort. And also, we think about wear and tear on furniture and making sure that it can withstand this. It's a little bit heavier, has a little bit more weight to it. We know that these things have to slide very easily, but also need to having a particular piece of furniture that can be easily moved, but withstand the test of time. So this doesn't need to be replaced too often. The furniture has to have the durability to kind of withstand, both a lunch crowd and then a late night crowd. So, and I mean, the details were done in a very, again, we talked about play at the beginning of this space. It has darker, deep tones. It has rich tones of wood, but we definitely wanted to insert a bit of playfulness, a breath of fresh air into the space, a little bit of whimsy, and we were able to capture that through a lot of the custom details that we were able to work into the space. We're lucky enough to have a fabrication shop attached to our office, so we were able to fabricate a good majority of the custom elements that went into the whole project. One, for instance, is one of my favorite details is the entrance to this space is a bit narrower. So when you walk in, you're walking along the bar. So it's a 16-seater bar. You have an area that can be double loaded so people can sit in the bar stool seats and people can stand and have a drink rail right behind them. And then there's enough room for traffic to kind of pass through. On the side with the drink rail, because we knew people would be standing quite close to it, engage with it, we designed a wall that at first glance you would imagine is a leather tufted wall. Again, of this rich mahogany color, classic look. That's actually CNC milled and treated in a particular way. So it looks like leather, but you kind of get that bit of play, that bit of whimsy, that like unexpected detail when you go up to it and touch it in a way and realize, oh, wow, that's actually a hard surface that they've made look soft. And then we were able to work in light fixtures that are of a diamond shape that kind of take up 4 modules of this kind of tufted wall that insert perfectly. So that is a luxury of design build, is we can order these lights in, measure exactly the dimensions of them, mill this pattern out specifically to that light, and then have it fit perfectly on this wall. So you have this seamless system of something that, looks like you just want to touch it, and everything fits so perfectly, which is really difficult to do when a lot of times you read on a detail sheet or a spec sheet, it's 4 inches. When you get it, it's really 4 1/8 or 3 7/8. And we're constantly dealing with that. So we always prefer to get it physically here. And again, the luxury of having a CNC machine right next door to us, we're able to size things perfectly, prototype, work through ways of achieving the design in the way we thought of it. So that's just one little detail. The bar is kind of pretty much overflowing with custom details. The bar front, we did in a really nice, it has a bit of an Art Deco mid-century feel with the backgammon patterning of two-tone wood. It has inlaid brass. That's a really gorgeous detail that gives proportion and rhythm to such a long bar. So we were able to, again, go through the process of prototyping those panels. So cutting something out in the triangular form with the brass piece, and going through probably 6 rounds of stain to make sure it's the right tone, it's the right contrast. And we were also battling with, this is going off in a bit of a different tangent, but we tried to keep some of the things that were there. Part of, at least in New York City for sure, you go into a restaurant and a lot of times you're ripping the whole thing out and throwing it away. It breaks my heart to see that kind of waste going into any space where you're throwing almost a whole restaurant in the trash. So we really try to, find what we can use and be surgical in our demolition. So we're really being intelligent about, we're not wasting things that could be reused. This was quality work done by somebody that, if there's a way that we can incorporate it in and sticks, to this brand and meshes well with it. That's really the goal, is to be we really like to treat the client's money like it's our own and be responsible with that. And be thoughtful, and it's sustainable wherever we can be. So we're constantly working with things. The bar is a great example because the bar was there. All we did was, and thinking about where plumbing is and things like that, the logistics of expanding a bar is quite difficult. So we did extend the bar 5 feet, kept it in its original footprint, and we're able to kind of minimize the amount of utility work that was necessary in order to have kind of a larger bar presence, which was important for the client. And in that bar, I had mentioned the custom bar backgammon pattern bar front. We did custom bar stools that were fixed. And the reason we made them fixed is for my description earlier, where you have a bar rail just behind the seats, and then you also want to have through traffic. So if you have a seat that can move, someone could be walking by and then someone could have a drink behind them, and somebody pushes out their seat, and all of a sudden, someone spills a drink, and you've created a situation that could have been avoided. So by having a fixed stool, it allows the kind of flow of traffic to work really well. It allows the guests at the bar not to have any issues with getting in and out of their seat. And it the space also always looks beautiful. So the spacing is correct. We can then align the post of the stool with the pattern on the bar front, which we always like when things align in a very intentional way. But, staying on the bar, we worked with Ace of Shades, who's and Cherise, stop me at any time because I can just keep going.
No, I want to hear. This is fantastic. No, you're telling me all kinds of great details that are going to lead into some of our later questions. So feel free.
Great. The bar top, we worked with Ace of Shades, who designed some custom lampshades for us to, have a unique touch. And, we like to, lighting is beyond important, especially in an intimate movie place like this. So having light specifically placed on the bar that, you can sit and have a meal there and feel a little bit more ownership over your space when you have 2 people sitting, where you feel like you're sharing the whole surface. But as soon as a fixture is placed in between you, it gives you a little bit of that anchor and a little bit of that presence, like this is my space. And adorning that light with a custom shade that, has some tassels and some fringe and some of that lace quality to it. It just, it has the warm light. It has the feeling we were trying to convey through, every detail of the space. But little details like that, it's always nice to work with other creatives and collaborators, like Ace of Shades, who did a great job with those. We did a custom back bar as well, and custom bar ceiling. That's just the bar. So I can keep going into the space and talk through.
Well, we're going to have some more opportunities and some future questions to get into more of some of these things. I have to ask a couple things though before we move on from this one. Is that fringe on the bar stools?
It is, yeah. So we found that, and I have to mention Jamie Johnson, who was the lead designer on this project, did a fantastic job. She found that fringe. We were able to work with the upholstery team who did all of the banquettes, and we added that little fringe detail, which is, it's such a small thing, but it does so much for the presence of that stool and, you know, the character of it. And again, we go back to that play idea. It's more fun. It's more fun to look at. It's more fun to sit in. It just gives you this feeling like, you know, I can have a little bit more fun here. It has a little bit more of a playful quality.
Well, it jumped right out at me. And I have to say that the back bar, what I love when I look at this picture is how neat and organized, but still simple. It's not, I don't, you've got a lot of things you detailed here, and I'm not a fan of busy.
Yeah.
And I don't feel busy at all when I look at this picture, and those insets for the bottles of the alcohol to you know, keeping it more organized, and just I can feel the warmth through a picture. And those lamps on the bar, those shades, that is genius. Because one of the things I've always hated about sitting at a bar is feeling like you're crammed in with all these people. And there really isn't anything on the bar to kind of define your space. I wouldn't have thought of that in a million years. So the other comment I wanted to make before the next question is the leather, not leather wall. So I had in the back of my head at some point, I'm asking him about the leather wall because I thought it was a leather wall. And all I could think about is restaurants are inherently, I worked in a few as a young person, difficult places to keep clean.
Yeah, cool.
And I saw that wall and I'm like, okay, this is not like it's a fast food restaurant with grease flying everywhere, but a restaurant is a restaurant. Sure. And you got a nightclub and people do stupid things in nightclubs sometimes. Absolutely. And like, oh, how do they keep that clean? And to find out that was a hard surface.
Yeah.
Just...
a cleanable, wipeable surface. Yeah. So if somebody spills a drink, it worked out really well. And it was a clever little twist on what your expectation would be. And I'm glad it had that effect through the photo as well. And that's the thing. You're going to have to go there and experience the space to, you know, interact with that detail. But it's also that fun play of what you expect it to be. And then you get there and it kind of turns it on its head a little bit, which we enjoy.
I double taked on that photo. It's like that can't be leather. They wouldn't put leather.
Well, it's
in
also
a bar that's also a nightclub. It can't be. And I'm looking close. It might be something else, but it looks like leather.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless it can rip or tear or, you know, any of those things. So, it was a nice move. And also just the curvature in the pockets created by that piece helps with acoustics as well. So, you know, it worked on many fronts for us.
So creating a design in an existing space that meets all the goals that you need to meet, particularly in an old, in this case, really old building, comes oftentimes with its own set of challenges. We love to talk about some of the challenges because I think that's where we grow the most as professionals, and the problems we have to, I don't like the word problems, in the challenges that we have to solve. Every project has challenges. What would you say in this particular project, your top one or two biggest design challenges were? Things that you wanted to do that you had to make work in this space, and how did you get where you needed to go?
Yeah, no, great question. I think we talked about one of them. I think one of the biggest challenges is always a narrow entry that we had. You know, that having, you know, people walk through and enter a space and that procession to start out a bit narrow is a challenge. But you can embrace that and have kind of that compression and release, which, you know, is a beautiful thing. So we were able to kind of highlight that compression, but still balancing it. You know, you have the fixed stool, you have a narrower bar rail that we tested, you know, all sorts of glassware and understood the diameter of your typical glass to make sure that could still sit properly on that rail, but still provide room to go through without feeling too compressed. You know, you mentioned the pockets on the back bar. They specifically in certain areas have mirrors, so it feels a bit bigger than it is. But as you walk through that space, it kind of leads us to our next challenge was making the dance floor bigger. And, we always have a budget on a project, and that being such a force in why this project came to be was to make sure that it was this late night, dance floor centric space. Was we had to make that bigger. So we had to, figure out a way to actually grow the upper level of the floor and, expanding that, it was a concrete floor. So expanding that concrete platform out over into the dining room. But it really helped adjust the proportions of the space. It actually made the lower dining room that much more intimate and cozy. And I think it enhanced the proportions of that space while doing the same for the upper. So it's also it was very difficult working in an operating hotel. So everything that we're talking about, one requirement for this project was we had to stay open for breakfast throughout the duration of construction. So they had to maintain a breakfast menu throughout the whole process of us building the space. So what, we first thought of is like, okay, we need to actually build a vestibule so it connects to the, so it's almost like a separate design project where we built a small kiosk that when you open the doors from the hotel lobby, you see just kind of this backdrop of a small cafe. So we essentially built that space so then we could do construction on the rest of the space without having guests come in and out. We also weren't able to work during certain hours because, again, we're directly adjacent to hotel guests. So that was a challenge. I think another big challenge was the bathrooms. The existing space only had 2. So we needed to add a fixture, minimum 1, into an existing bathroom footprint. So we had to get very clever on how we subdivided these while still maintaining the ADA accessibility paths and spatial clearances for the restrooms. And, we were able to figure that out, but then, you figure it out from a design standpoint. Then we realized there's a gym downstairs. So the hotel gym is directly underneath us. So when we're trying to, drill through it to run new waistline and water lines, it becomes quite challenging when you have a functional gym that, again, the hotel has to maintain that amenity for its guests, working at, odd hours in order to get that done, and working within the existing footprint of that space, of that bathroom space. So we didn't have to, we could avoid moving a wall, spending more than we need to on the restrooms. Certainly were challenging, but we were able to kind of, create a unique bathroom experience, honestly, just by adding an additional fixture or stall, putting full height walls and doors to give that level of intimacy, making it a communal bathroom. So putting the sink actually outside for all 3 stalls. So really maximizing that space and squeezing every inch out of it. And again, adjusting to the constraints of the actual building with, an 18-inch slab that we had to drill through was quite challenging. And again, especially with maintaining that gym being open. So we had to do that at odd hours, but then you have to be careful because you have guests sleeping during those hours. So there's a lot of things that are happening in order just to get that one extra bathroom fixture.
So as I was reading about your project and looking at the pictures, I was totally intrigued when I read that almost everything in the agency of record, including lights, tables, bar stools, millwork, and more, were custom designed and fabricated in your workshop in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Okay, this is not something I ever hear on a project or get to talk about, so I need to know all the things.
Yeah.
That's because I think that is just, number one, it's gorgeous, and that's a whole different set of skills as far as craftsmanship than architecture.
Yeah.
I am in love with this whole concept. So tell me about this. How did you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't even know where to start. Just tell me all about it. Selfishly, I have always wanted to be able to make what I think of or what I design, and always had the desire to have, the firm be design build, but design build with the fabrication angle being incredibly important. So being able to make what we design, it was so simple. We want to be able to have control over the final output, and
we are lucky to have a space in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, where we have two buildings that are joined together. One is our office and one is our shop. So I have to give a shout out to Heather Kushner, who runs our shop. She does a fantastic job and brought a lot of these details to life. We have a extreme luxury where, as we're designing, we can go next door and say, hey, I'm thinking about this detail. Can this work? Or how does this work? Or can I do this? And that sort of communication and those conversations that happen enrich the design to, a whole nother level. I think the tufted wall is such a great example because we prototyped that a few times before we made it. We tried to make it out of foam first, a high density foam that we then put a fiberglass coating on, and then we painted. Didn't have quite the right finish. So we're able, again, I'm going back to this theme of play. We're able to play and experiment and just, tap into the mindset and the know-how of Heather and her team and say, we have these great ideas, and this is how I think we should build it. Let me know what you think. So there's that dialogue back and forth that allows us to, come up with the best possible solution that can be built. How often are we designing things that either completely have to change once they enter construction because no one thought about, the light fixture is a great example, like how this nests in and this needs to be perfect. And then all of a sudden you walk into your space, you're like, there's something weird about that wall that doesn't align. And I feel like it should have. It's like we're able to notice that and then solve for that before it becomes a problem. And, having a full wood shop next door and having that luxury to be able to, and trust of a client to say, hey, you want to build a space, you want to design a space. Our talent is in being incredibly clever and also budget conscious of, designing a beautiful space without a doubt, but then making sure it's possible to be built within your budget, because restaurants in New York are insanely competitive and really hard to not just open, then, maintain a steady flow of customers. And why the shop is so valuable is we get to pick our moments. We get to say the bar is such a, focal point of this project. Let's make sure we invest in that and, come up with details that, work from so many different levels, being the durability we talked about, making sure that we're satisfying that, creativity that needs to be embedded into the space, making sure it's functional and making sure it can happen for the amount of money that you have it for. So the upper area on the bar is, I'll let everybody in on a little secret. There's like a little eyebrow detail that's it looks like textured glass that has these individualized glass squares that kind of run across the entire bar, mimic the shape of the bar top. So it really gives the bar a form in a way if you want to fill in, your eye wants to fill in the gap between the eyebrow and the bar top. That's actually made out of acrylic with a textured film, because we realized that this was a space that a guest is never going to physically touch and engage with. And the quality of how the light passes through it and what it does, for your view through it and what it does for the space is so important. We can't lose that detail because, budget constraints, you can't necessarily afford that many individual cut pieces of textured glass. We'll find out another way to do it. So that's really part of our mindset is we love the design. We're going to figure out a way to make it where we focus on the quality and durability and, lasting power of the things where it's necessary, but things that we can be clever about and tricky about, we're going to use that so we still get the design and the overall aesthetic impact without, giving away too much to the customer or the guest. They still kind of feel that presence and feel that play of light, which was the intent.
That was another feature I loved.
Yeah.
And I thought it was glass. It must be so much fun coming to work in your office every day.
I hope so. I'm still having fun. So that's a big part of it. And, again, just being around different materials, and experimenting with them. And, even if it doesn't work, like I mentioned, that foam and fiberglass combination, it didn't work here, but we now know how that works and what materials can go together well. And maybe we'll use that technique on a different project. So it's not, even when we prototype and then pivot, there's nothing lost there because there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot of creativity that went into it that will, again, rise to the surface for another project potentially.
I am just totally completely impressed and amazed
Yeah.
of what your firm is doing in that respect, and having that workshop and looking at this. This does not look like something somebody went out and did in their garage.
No.
I encourage all the listeners to really go look at these pictures because this is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Heather does great work next door. It's,
well,
great to have her.
hey,
Yep.
shout out to you also, Heather.
Yeah.
Interiors here are a big deal. Obviously, we've talked a lot about them, and you have so many different things going on here, and all of them are incredible. You've told me about some of them.
Sure.
Tell me in more detail about one or two of the other spaces, parts of the, we've talked a lot about the bar. I think we've, I don't know, there's probably some secret things I'm missing, but I think we hit all the big points of the bar.
We did.
Tell me a little bit about your vibe and feel for the interiors overall. What are some of the other things you did?
Yeah, so as you move past the bar and move into the main, dining area dance floor, so that's 2 levels. So the seating is designed in 2 different ways on each of these levels. On the lower level, with the expansion of the dance floor, we actually were able to do what I mentioned earlier, some surgical demo, pivot one of the existing banquettes and actually tuck it into a corner. So the idea was to create these pockets of intimacy. So you can feel like you're, depending upon your mood or your crowd, you're either a part of this bigger space or you have this little, private niche in the back room that, you feel like you can have a more private conversation or a date or group gathering. So we used the shape of the banquettes as well as curtains that kind of drape on either side and adorn each seating area. So they, in all actuality, could be closed or that almost becomes its own room. But even when they're draped to the side, you have, a level of privacy, both from, you have light fixtures that are specific to the tables in those pockets. You have acoustics that are then incredibly intimate because of the use of the curtains around it and the soft seating. So you feel like you're really in your own special pocket in all of these spaces in the dining room. So it became like a really nice way to provide a variety of different experiences and ways of sitting and enjoying the space, all in one little dining room. So just how the seats are arranged and broken up, you can, sit on the bench banquette and have kind of an intimate conversation across a table at a 2-seater, or you can be in one of these curvaceous banquettes in the corner that, again, a bigger group would have a nice private party in. I'm in love with the PDR, which is the very backmost space. So you actually walk through the bar, across the dance floor, and you take 2 steps down into the PDR, which I think is a really important aspect to the entry, where you do feel like you're entering a different space. So you take 2 steps down, and then you're walking into a space that's doubly curved. So it's curved around you, and then it's curved over your head in this dome-like shape. So it gives you, again, another kind of this warmth, this intimacy, this kind of just you're nestled into a particular seat. And the versatility of this space is really interesting because we designed it to do a few different things. One, be a great space to rent out, have a business lunch, have a meeting. We, again, our shop fabricated these custom arch doors. So it's 3 door panels that can open all the way up and have that PDR space actually be an extension of the dining room, or it can be closed and could be an intimate private lunch, private dining event, party, whatever it may be. In the evening, late evening hours, it becomes, almost like a VIP room. So you're just behind the DJ. You have this private, more exclusive space. It can be closed. And with the use, again, that's where that's real glass on those doors, textured glass that's real glass with a textured film. So again, we use the film there as a visual trick. But those doors were built in-house. Again, having the luxury of, being able to order the glass, test out this vinyl treatment on it to make sure that it didn't come across as, when you think about sticking something on a piece of glass, like it might seem a bit gimmicky or might not have the right, level of finish that we're looking for in the space. But because of the weight, the visual weight of those doors, the thickness of the wood trim that wraps them, the shape of them, it worked out perfectly where it gives you that bit of distortion when they're closed, but you can make out that there's some silhouettes moving. So you're intrigued by what's happening in there, but you're not quite sure. So the next time you're like, I want to sit in that space or rent that room, and you're drawn to it a bit. And it has that kind of natural rhythm where it pulls you in, because of the curves. You just kind of, you're almost funneled in the space in a way, and just kind of nestled there. So that space can be, the tables were custom designed and built here as well, designed in a way that they can be pushed together to form one long group table, or all in the shape kind of to the two end pieces, have these more dramatic curves that mimics the shape of the banquette. But then they can also be pulled apart and be individual 2 or 4 seater tables.
I never would have guessed that was a film. And I want to go check out this space so bad.
If you're ever in New York, Cherise, happy to take you there.
I know. I think the closest I know of so far, I'll be in DC and in Philly this year, I think. But I may have to make a side trip, I swear to God, just to go check out this bar.
It's a short train ride from Philly.
That I could do. So I've actually done several interviews with architects in New York. Really cool projects. I love to talk about construction because we all know that's where the rubber meets the road, and where you're going to run into things you didn't anticipate. All the best planning in the world, that's just what construction is. Add that to the fact that you're in New York City. It's dense, it's busy. You're in a hotel that has to stay operating the whole time. You've got all these different things going on. And when you have the extra things, like just staging some construction, I know at some projects in New York is a nightmare because of how dense and how busy the city is. And so that will just almost amplify sometimes challenges during construction.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about the construction phase of this project. And we know you faced some challenges with times of day you could work with the operating hotel, but what were some of the challenges you faced during construction? And if you had to pivot somewhere, what did you do to get where you need to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say everything in New York is packed in. So you don't have much room to move around, and every inch is used. One of the things we dealt with from just a logistics standpoint was getting materials into the space, and the service entrance. It's an old hotel. It was built a very long time ago, and the entrance, through the back, through the delivery corridor, is incredibly narrow. And it's an active hotel. So there's, people store their luggage in there. They sometimes had some linens in there. It was a well-used hallway. But at the same time, all of our material had to go in and out of the same hallway, which made it, the timing and just the logistics of maneuvering large sheet material or, framing material or drywall, anything like that, in and out of this corridor was incredibly difficult. And it led into the kitchen, which then led into our space. And again, because of the use of the space as an operating breakfast venue, we had to go through these kind of back corridors in order to get the material in and allow our team to work. So that was an incredible challenge that, I give a lot of credit to the staff of the Renwick as well, working with their team and, what are the best times to bring materials in? How do we, make sure that we don't brush up against anything that's in the hallway that's important, bump into somebody's suitcase? It's just working with their team and really the people that own and operate the space, and even the restaurant after we left it, who are going to be, left to maintain this. That was really important to us. It was the building that relationship, understanding, what they've been through, what works, what doesn't, how to bring materials in. We're always looking to those folks who know the building better than anyone else. What are the tricks here? How can we make this work? And what are the pitfalls we can avoid and not have to learn for ourselves, hopefully. So logistics there, it was incredibly, I guess we learned a lot, and we learned the right people to talk to in order to get things done. And I think I mentioned it before, just the timing that we could work, getting the I think soundproofing was also another one that was a little bit more difficult. We did some actual sound tests of, turning on a sound system that we just mocked up in the space, and then, waited till the guests were gone in the rooms directly above to do a decibel test to make sure that once this is a, more of a nightclub vibe, that we're going to be responsible. So again, it goes back to just everyone being on top of each other in New York. You have to think about, even in a low bar space with a hotel room above, with several inches of concrete, still making sure that we're soundproofing it properly. We're not disrupting the guests. And we're, again, this can, turn the music up as loud as you want. You're going to be fine. So it's kind of about proximity and squeezing a lot into a small space.
I can imagine that the next time you do a project like this, you've got a whole list of questions you'd probably ask right up front that maybe you didn't know to ask on this one. And that's what I love about the challenges in a project. You may have to go through a little pain and suffering to learn that thing, but you'll never do that again. Or you'll do something sooner that you just didn't know had you done it sooner, it might have made the path a little easier.
Yeah. And we talked about that with the bathrooms earlier too, knowing that the waistlines are actually above the gym and being able to, not discovering that a little bit later, because we did go through so many iterations and layouts of that bathroom, but, having to work around it and work around guests, we respect our guests, the clients, and we'll always want to do right by them. So, making sure that we cause as little pain as possible, again, to the staff that probably would have to deal with, why are they making so much noise in the gym? Or, just being really cognizant of the fact that there are, guests paying money to stay here, although we are doing construction and need to get these things done, just making sure everybody works together well, and communication, just saying, we're going to be, drilling this hole at this time. It's going to be quite loud. If you get a noise complaint, let them know it's not going to last very long, just so they're equipped with the right information that they need to, again, put the guest's mind at ease that, yes, it's loud, but at least it will be over soon.
So this is I don't want to call it a curveball question. You can answer it or not, depending. Yeah. But something just popped into my head, because we all hear stories and rumors, and some are true and some are not as bad as they make it sound.
Wow.
Did you have any issues in getting your permits and approvals for this? In such an old building, it would seem to me that they were going to want a lot of things upgraded, or...
Yeah, I think, because we tried to be really smart about what we were going to move and why, and really limit it to the minimal amount of major utilities disruptions as possible. Fortunately, New York City Department of Building, I've heard bad stories too, but in terms of permit acquisition, it can be quite efficient. We've been working in the city for a decent amount of time, and have great expediters and people that help facilitate the permit acquisition process. And when you're working just exclusively on the interior as well, it makes things a lot easier. We were able to execute this design without impacting any major utilities. So the two biggest changes we made were, the addition of that bathroom fixture, and then we moved just one sprinkler head in the bar area, where we dropped that ceiling that was made of the sapele wood to kind of give it that warmth. So we were very specific about what we were going to move and why, and kept that to a minimum to avoid any overly complicated permitting processes. So we're lucky. I will, knock on wood, that we were quite fortunate to move through that process smoothly. It's certainly not always the case. We've had other projects that, in the past, just to give you an example, we did 2 projects, both in historic buildings in the West Village, both landmarked. One took 3 weeks to get our landmark approval. The other took 7 months. So it's quite unpredictable with the landmarks with LPC, but with the permit for interior permits, NYC DOB has been good to us. We've worked quite well, and it's been quite smooth so far.
That's great to hear, because you don't, like, I've recently heard some horror stories about getting permits in California, on projects like
California,
months and months and months. Of course, I joke that
we've
California
done
is
some
like working
projects.
on Mars. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done some projects there and went through that. We did a project in West Hollywood, and it took quite a bit of time to get the permitting in. It's just going through zoning, but you know what? I really appreciate their diligence. It makes you, think, question, review all of your design work and your documentation so it's perfect. So there is value in slowing things down for sure.
So I absolutely love, obviously, I've said this probably 48 times now. I absolutely love the look and feel of this space, and I would totally go visit there if I was in the neighborhood. What advice would you give to aspiring designers taking on a project like this to help them start off on the right foot?
Yeah, I love this question. I think, going into any projects in New York, especially design build projects is, I would gear your decision making towards action. I'm a big fan of, there's a lot that can be talked and theorized about, and I think I would say erring on the side of action is always really important. I think especially for younger designers coming up is don't lose your kind of academic mind. In school, you do a lot of theoretical design, you do a lot of diagrammatic design, and that in the first part of a design project is so important. Honestly, that is what made us expand the dance floor, because just, going through that process of program diagrams, expansion, and being like, why can't we move the floor? Like, why can't we make this level bigger? So it's really kind of challenging what you think is set. It's just like, oh, there's 2 levels. That's how big they're both going to be. We'll have to work around. It's like, not necessarily. We can kind of think outside of that and allow kind of some free thinking to drive those decisions. And then it opens up, and all of a sudden the proportions are just perfect because you allowed yourself to not be too constrained by even a constraint that's there. So I think having that freedom and that ability to not be afraid to fail, I think is really important. You're going to. Construction is never going to go exactly as you planned. Design is never going to be executed exactly as you planned. We have a wood shop next door to us. Things still don't always go exactly as you plan them. And you have to be okay with that and just be like, this is an opportunity for me to think about this again, to maybe do it a little bit better, and to, just change my mindset a bit. It's not, you want to, have your, have the force and will behind your design, but you don't want to let that cloud the ability to kind of be nimble and pivot and allow other things to enter and actually make the design even better than you thought it could be. So definitely don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think that they're going to happen. They're definitely going to happen.
Well, and I loved one of the things you said earlier when you were talking about experimenting with the leather, not leather wall, which I'm going to call it that forever now. In that, well, maybe that, and I don't like the word fail either, but so maybe that initial foam design thing that you tried failed for this space, but you learned something that may work outstanding for a different space. So not every fail is really a fail. It
100%.
Just maybe it's a fail for this space, but now you are armed with some knowledge that may work perfectly somewhere else.
Exactly. And I think it's taking those calculated risks too. Jamie, who is, our lead designer on this project, there's columns in the space that you can see in the photos. And an important detail for us was to actually soften these columns and give them a radius. So they all have curved edges. And, again, we have a budget on every project, and it was, we came to the point of like, we have to figure out we have trim that, outlines these in the striped pattern. How do we bend trim like that? Are we going to individually, steam bend every piece of hardwood? Are we going to, how are we going to get this size trim to have that effect? And we were both like, we need to figure it out and find a way. And Jamie, did great research, didn't give up on that detail, and found a beautiful piece of flex trim that even when she asked about it, they're like, it's not going to take that radius. And she's like, you know what? We're going to order it anyways. We're going to test it. Because that's a big part of our ethos here is just test it out, see how it works. We'll at least learn something from it. So we got it in, tried it, and it took the radius perfect. With a little light sanding, took paint perfectly, and became such a great part of the design and the detailing that we've since used that product on other projects. That's actually the trim that's in the PDR where you see it kind of carrying that line up. So that was a detail we added after the fact, and we realized this trim could work in the way it could. So it opened up the doors for new ideas and thoughts, and again, enhanced the overall design in areas where it wasn't even planned to be used.
Well, and what a great way to give a column personality that it never would have had otherwise. Because that was another, I mean, there's so many different things that I could talk to you probably for the next few hours about this project. Because every time I skip back and forth between these pictures, I see something else. It's like, I can't ask about all of it. So, but it's amazing. It's creative and it's inventive, and that advice of, use your learning, but don't be afraid to see beyond what's already there. I think is invaluable. And I think that sometimes our industry builds fear into the job. I always try to tell younger people there are no stupid questions. There are no stupid ideas, because this business is all about being creative, finding that thing that works, and you're never going to find it if you keep your brain inside this box.
Really?
So the other question I've been just dying to ask: your firm is a design build firm. Not a lot of architecture firms. I don't know of any, actually, to be perfectly. I know they're out there, but I don't know of any.
Yeah.
Tell me about that a little bit. Why you chose that model as opposed to the traditional architecture firm path. I know your love with creating, but there's a whole different level of everything when you put building into that mix. What made you to have the backbone? I'll be perfectly honest. What made you have the backbone to go ahead and do this?
Yeah, you know what? I have to give a little shout out to my dad. He ran a continues to be involved with a design build engineering firm, and I was able to work with him for a few years before I went back to graduate school, and he had the design build method, a much different scale. They do a lot of industrial plants and things like that, but it was when I experienced it, I was like, wow, it makes so much sense. You can be faster, which, especially in hospitality in New York, it's so much about speed, where you need to get open because you either have a certain period of free rent or you have a certain amount of TI, and your whole business model is based on opening on X date and then starting to generate revenue. So being able to be faster is incredibly valuable to a client. I think it's also, I had an issue with turning over a set of drawings and just be saying, I'm done. My part of this is done now. Someone go build it. And it's just, for me, that's my favorite part of it is actually seeing, it's a lot of what we talked about, seeing these things be built, seeing that little, you know what? I forgot about that thickness of the wood isn't 3/4 inch. It's actually an inch. And that pushes this out and out and out. And how much you learn from being there physically with the tradesmen who are, putting this thing together, or laying the tile, and the grout needs to be this perfect line so it aligns with that next detail. And understanding all of the things that go into that is invaluable. And, leaving that to someone else and actually not having a part in that just seemed like, if you have the opportunity, why wouldn't you? And it allowed for more creativity. It really allowed for the freedom to, help guide the client to be like, invest in this because, we can build this in a particular way. And, let's be creative here, where I don't think we'd have the same result in a lot of these projects if we weren't given the trust, and if we didn't have the actual mindset and shop to kind of test out materials, see how they work, and experiment. I think you lose that ability to experiment and prototype when you're just designing. So it's not easy, I will say that. You get to certainly reap the rewards when everything goes well, but you're also then, if anything goes wrong, it comes back to you. And I think there's a we talked about play a lot, but responsibility is also really important. Someone's trusting you with their vision or their dream. And I think when you're able to kind of be a bit more of a director and saying, okay, I have my team that's fabricating. I know my tradesmen. I know how they work. And you're able to kind of move the pieces a little bit, easier and faster, or you're also able to build relationships with the trades and saying like, oh, hey, do you mind? I need that light fixture actually over just a ½ inch. And it's not this whole process of like, oh, that's a change order. Let me get approval. Let me talk to this person. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you can move that light fixture the ½ inch. And where I can just be like, hey, like we need that moved over, shifted over. We can talk about, the financial repercussions or whatever that is, but we're able to be a lot more, think on our feet a little bit more, solve problems, which I think is really important. But it's riskier, I think, in doing design build, but seeing the manifestation of an idea from like it just truly being in your head as just this, this nugget of a concept, and then letting that germinate and, designing it and then testing it and then seeing it built and getting to be a part of that whole process intimately is, really why I love the work that we do here. So I don't think I'd want to do it any other way.
So I'm listening to you, and I'm a spec writer. My day job, I'm a spec writer, and contractual language and risk and all of that is a big part of my world. Mm-hmm. And then I hear you say it's riskier, and I know what errors and omissions takes. What a typical design firm. So second rabbit hole question, or third or 12th, I don't know what I'm on now. Do you have a different model with your errors and omissions and insurance in a design build than you do in a regular firm? Or how do you, because obviously design build, you're taking on both the design portion of the risk and the build portion of the risk. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's two, honestly, we have two different insurance companies, just to get technical with it, that for our, the general contracting side of things, there's a certain, insurance policy that we have to have that, New York City, that's also, I will say, a challenge of New York City is the insurance policies that are required to work here and work in a lot of these buildings is incredibly expensive and difficult to maintain. So you have to, really go for it and perform and, do well in order to kind of keep things running. It's a challenging place to work without a doubt. But I mean, I can't give you the most eloquent answer on this. I'd almost have to defer to my insurance brokers. But we do have to have two separate policies in terms of errors and omissions, ones that protect the actual contract documents, the construction documentation, and then the general contracting side.
Well, and that's a perfect answer. And one of the reasons I wanted to ask it is because I teach this. I teach a 12-week class twice a year on project delivery and risk and responsibilities and contractual requirements. And I felt it was important because what you're doing is really cool to just state out loud, and obviously I see more of this out of the box, doing new innovative things from younger professionals, to state out loud that you can't just go with your architecture license and your E&O insurance and go and jump out and do this. You need to look at other things because you are taking on, you're not sharing the risk anymore. You're taking on more of the risk, and you need to understand that. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask it, is just to kind of make that clear.
Yeah.
You can't just go start this firm and not do some things differently than you would in a normal architectural firm.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I always close out every episode with two closing questions. One is a broad industry question, and one is my everybody gets this one question.
Okay.
And I decided on my broad industry question to stick with the design build theme, because I think what you're doing is incredibly innovative. So since your firm is a design build firm, in your opinion, what do you think is the future for design build in our industry? Do you think we're going to see more projects delivered this way? Do you think we're going to, they used to call it back in the old day, kind of the master builder model, where all of those people were under one roof? Do you think this is the direction we're going to end up going?
Yeah, I wish I could say it would be, because it for all of the reasons that I've mentioned, before in this podcast of why I love doing the work that I do. I will say, if I'm talking about New York specifically, I'd say it may not. I actually think, especially the model that we have here, is quite rare because of it's hard to work in New York City. It's incredibly competitive. It's hard to have a wood shop in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. I mean, just true expense. It's not an inexpensive place to have the amount of square footage that we have, and it's difficult, for sure. I think we mentioned the risk involved. I think we mentioned the responsibility involved. You are responsible for every aspect of the project. There's nothing that you can say and point a finger and say, oh, that was supposed to be their job or their job. Anything that slips through the cracks is still on you. So you're taking on a great deal of responsibility, which, not to say that people don't want to do that. I think it's just a more challenging environment. But I think it's invaluable, the kind of communication and the rubbing shoulders that you end up having with trades, with people that are actually doing the work, and what you learn from that. But I can't see it so much more happening in New York. And I will say it also, design build is a tricky term where a lot of people use it. And I think there's a lot of them are, not talking ill of anyone, but, a lot of design build firms are general construction firms that hire a designer and call themselves design build. And we started doing just design and prototyping and fabrication, and slowly grew into what we are now. But I think it's just a different way of thinking that, I think it boils down to education as well, where I think I was incredibly lucky to have the design build experience that I did before going back to grad school, especially I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn for my master's, and it's an incredibly theoretical school, but importantly so. Like, you learn to think beyond the confines of the physical world. Gravity gets to go away for a little while when it's convenient, and you get to have that more experimental thought process and learn about that. But I had 3 years of experience being on a job site before that, so it was a rare kind of combination of having the practicality with the experimental, which I wish more education and institutes had, because it's so incredibly valuable. And then once you have a little bit of that itch, you just want more of it, and you want to be a part of the build and the construction and the fabrication.
You couldn't have answered that question better for me if I begged you to. Getting your hands dirty is never going to do you wrong. Getting out there and actually seeing and touching and feeling and understanding how things really come together, as opposed to what you're drawing, is going to make you a better designer faster than almost anything else you can do.
I agreed. And communication too, just where, the traits, they see you in the weeds with them, that you're there, you're trying to figure it out too. And you're not just saying, I drew it, do it exactly how I drew it, when actually it doesn't work how it was drawn. And that's actually influenced how we create, some of our CD sets, is like, we know how these things are actually built, and we know how they're being looked at. And so how we incorporate, this goes back to our question about tech and keeping that in mind. It's like, we have 3D diagrams, right next to the 2D section, and exploded axonometric diagrams to show like the assembly of parts. So it's really more about communicating with the people that what they're looking at, how they're looking at it, and what information that they actually need to build this how you hope it's built. Because we've been through it, because we've built a few of these things ourselves. So it really aids in that communication, which I really think builds the strength and trust with the people that are actually doing the construction. And that's really when you get the best final result.
I've worked in multiple disciplines, construction, mostly architecture, MEP engineering, and now building science. And it's a humbling experience when I used to joke, when you cross to the dark side, or you cross back to the dark side, depending on who you want to call the dark side today. But it is a humbling experience when you put yourself, like my first one was coming from an architecture firm in 2008 after the economy tanked into an MEP firm. And the first thing I saw the first few months I was there is all the things I did wrong in working with my consultants when I was at the architecture firm, because now I'm standing in their shoes and they don't work the same way architects do.
Yeah.
They don't manage their documents the same way in their workflow. And that I commonly call that my 2x4 upside the head moment, that I never, ever again tried to complain about how somebody else works if I'm not going to take the time to sit down and what do you need and understand what you need and put myself in somebody else's shoes, which is another really invaluable piece of advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is having that knowledge. I love this interview. Final question. Everybody gets this question.
I'm ready.
Oh, good. I've freaked a couple people out with this question. Such a small question. As individuals, we all hope that to live a life that leaves some kind of impact or contribution to make the world a better place. I truly like to believe that. I jokingly call that mission my personal world domination statement. And I've had to clarify that question because no, I do not intend to take over the world. But my personal world, my world, there's a lot that I can do to affect my world. And so that's my personal world domination statement. There's even a hashtag. So personal or professional, how do you as an individual hope to make a difference or impact on our world? What's your personal world domination statement?
Yeah, it's a big question. But I like it. I mean, I think today we've talked a lot about play in work. And you just mentioned, personally or professionally, I'd like to merge them a bit. And, I think that there's also division between work and play, which similarly, I'd like to merge that a bit. So it, you still have that looseness, that whimsy, that fun in what you're doing every day, where it doesn't become too laborious or, just mundane. So, keeping that idea of play and that energy. And I think it was Albert Einstein that said, be the energy you want to see in the world. So if like that energy can be, seep into the spaces that we design and that we build, and that we've, left it a little bit better than when we got there. And people can pick up on that on, subconscious level as well as a conscious level. I would be a happy human. So,
well, I will tell you, that attitude and that mindset is clearly apparent in this project. It's beautiful. I feel the whimsy. I feel how unique it is. I would hang out here in a hot second. And I would feel at home in the space. It's a beautiful space. So Matt, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to throw one final question in there.
Please.
What's next? What's the firm up to? What can you expect to have me call you about in the future to come back and tell me about it?
We have some exciting stuff on the docket right now. We're doing 2 larger scale restaurant projects at the moment. One in Dallas, Texas, where we have we're working. It's adjacent to the Dallas Arts Tower, so it's part of that building. We're working on the Rotunda building. We're putting a Mediterranean restaurant in there. It's a beautiful building, a rotunda shape, skylights in the rotunda in the ceiling, gorgeous. So we're working on the design of that now. With that same group, we're working on a project in downtown Nashville as well, right on Broadway. So three-story restaurant there in old brick building, gorgeous bones. So excited to be able to show that to everyone soon. We have quite a few exciting projects coming, and would love to have a chance to talk about them again soon. That would be great.
Well, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Don't make a face. So I might have an opportunity at some point because it would not be unlike me to go to Dallas to see a game. And I'm going to be in Nashville later this year. Any chance that one's going to be done?
So I think it will be, we're wrapping up design now. Shell construction is already underway. I'd say give us about 6 months, and that would be. Yeah.
Okay. We may have to touch base.
Okay.
I think if I end up at this conference in Nashville, I think it's in November.
Okay.
So maybe there's a chance. So keep me posted, but I would love to have you back to hear about what else you're doing, because this is innovative and unique and amazing. And I think we'd have a lot of listeners want to hear what you're doing next.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Therese. Thank you for having me.